My name is Jim Groth. This is Jack Durian. We have Angel Alcaraz behind the camera, and we're here interviewing James Groth on May 7th in Brookfield, Wisconsin. All right. Thank you for joining us today, Grandpa. So let's start off with just the question of, what are some of your earliest memories?
My earliest memories?
Mm-hmm.
I can remember living on 4734 West Hampton. That was Glendale at the time, but then it was next to Milwaukee. That was 48th and Hampton. I can remember back about 40, 45. Before that, 43 I was born, so about 45. But it was a gravel road, and there was a farm across the street. And a couple of years later, there was trailers across the street because the war stopped. And then they paved the road. They had an exit to Milwaukee. That's about what I remember, the first part,
Mm-hmm. All right. So then, how was it like at home when you were growing up?
When I grew up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't much. The war was ending, and you couldn't buy a lot of stuff. I know my dad had a car, a 41 Chevy, and we went to go up north. You couldn't buy tires. Nobody had tires, so he got tires that were bald, that still had air in them, and he put 2 or 3 in the trunk. And on the way up north, we'd always have a couple flats because you couldn't get tires. You couldn't get a car. They didn't make a car since 41. I think the next one they made was in 46. So all those years, they made Army stuff, and all the metal and stuff, but that was it. And I know our neighbors. The neighbors we had were, we lived in a German neighborhood, and both sides of us one was a hairdresser. She lived down the road a block away. That was the nearest house. And on the other side was a little guy about 4 foot high that didn't speak English. He was German. His wife spoke English, but not him. And he had a junkyard, and he would collect metal scrap, and he'd put it in his backyard. And then he'd load up and sell it down by the lake. He'd take it down there and he'd sell it. And that's what he did. That was our neighbors for the first few years. And all of a sudden they built apartments and all stuff and a lot of houses because the war was ending. And then they had a lot of people were coming out of the Army and stuff, and they were getting married, and there was building houses like mad. And so that was the big thing, But there was a lot of you couldn't buy hardly anything because, it wasn't to be had. They didn't start making the stuff again. I think 46, 47 was the first years you could buy a car, and there was a waiting list a mile long because nobody could get a car for all those years. I know my dad ended up getting a 52 Oldsmobile. That was the car he bought. And it didn't come with a spare because they didn't have a spare tires. And he got a wheel, but he didn't get a spare. A rubber tire, the rubber part wasn't on it. Then he got that somewhere. But I can remember that. That was his new car. That was the first one he got. Yeah. But that's the way it was then. It wasn't too much around, to get. Mm-hmm. Then he had stamps for gasoline. He had to use a stamp every time you got every gallon of gas, a book of stamps. You had to give them a stamp for every gallon, and they rationed it off. And gas was 19 cents a gallon. Wow. But that's what it was, But everybody lived through it. Mm-hmm. That was it.
And so speaking about your dad, so you talked about in the pre-interview, he worked on a transfer ship for a while during the war, and then he worked at A.O. Smith. Can you tell us any more about that?
What's it called, the Badger? Is that what goes across from Milwaukee to Michigan? I think they used to haul railroad cars, and cars full of equipment and trucks and stuff, and they'd haul it over there and haul it back for the Army, and everything, so they could, because they had manufacturing in Milwaukee, and they had they made torpedoes and stuff here. Well, then he worked on that for a while, a couple of years. He went to college, was going to be a college teacher, professor, but there was no kids. They were all in the Army, World War II. So he worked on the ship, and then all his brothers and sisters, they all went into the Army, and he stayed home because his mother lived in Red Granite, and one kid had to stay home, but he stayed in Milwaukee, but he wasn't in the Army. But he had a certificate that when he worked on that ship, that was equal to working in the Army because they had to have it. So he worked there. Then when he stopped working there, and he went to A.O. Smith, they made torpedoes and bombs. It's I think it was about 124th and Capitol or something. They had a plant there. Then later on, they started making silos, A.O. Smith silos, those blue ones. They started making those there. Then he transferred over to the 27th and Capitol to the factory where they made car frames and truck frames. And he was a foreman of the Cadillac frame line for years. He retired doing that. So that was about it,
So with your father working on the transfer ships and with A.O. Smith, your mother, you had said, was also a hairdresser. So how did she get into hairdressing?
Well, she went to school to be a hairdresser, and then she worked for the German lady. She had a beauty shop, and when she was busy, she'd call my mother, or come over and get my mother, and then she'd work for her, and that's how she worked. She worked over there, part time, just a few hours a week, but that was it,
Yeah. And you had also mentioned growing up, you had, I believe it was 2 aunts and an uncle who lived with you at the same time?
Yeah, they when they got out of the Army, my 2 uncles got out of the Army, was Otto Kotz Jr. and Raymond Kotz. They lived with us, and one worked first shift, one worked second shift. And we didn't have too many extra beds, so they would, when one was sleeping, the other one was working, so they both used the same bed at different times. Then my Aunt June, she lived with us because she worked down here. I don't know where she worked though. It was some business down here. And then she lived with us for about a year, and they lived with us for about a year, 2 years, and then they went back up north. And he was a carpenter after a while, Otto Kotz Jr. In fact, he helped me on my house. And we had a crowded little house, very small. And we had upstairs that was not heated. That's where I slept. There was no heat upstairs, just a downstairs. Well, it was a coal furnace, so that was it.
And so, with the growing up, you went to Hampton School, you had told us. So how was going to Hampton School when you were a little kid?
I started there in kindergarten. And I would, the first day of kindergarten, I can still remember that. My mother took me, and I came home on my own, and every day after that, I would, now this was about 8 or 10 blocks to go, maybe almost a mile, maybe it was a little more than a mile. And I would run home at noon. I'd run there in the morning, run home at noon, eat lunch, and run back before I was over with, and I'd run home at night. So I had pretty good lungs because I was running all the time. But I was from kindergarten on, I did that until I think it was 7th grade, and then the schools were getting so full, our classes were in the gym, and they had tarps up, sheets up, so each class had their own, like 4 classes in there. Well, you could hear everybody talking in the other rooms, on the other side, because there was 4 different classes. And that was 6th and 7th grade. And then 8th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, I went to Edison. That was the old Custer High School. And then they were building Custer High School, and then they opened that up, and then they transferred the rest of the high school kids over there. Then the Edison was used for 8th and 9th grade. And then the 10th grade, I went to Custer, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And that was the closest school to our house. That was on Sherman and Congress.
And you mentioned you had seen Custer being built. Like there was no football fields. There was
Oh, there was nothing. The school wasn't even, when I went there, they didn't have, the school wasn't finished. They're still working on it, on the school itself, and there was just piles of dirt around it. And then later on, years later, they had a football field and a baseball field, and all that they built afterwards. But not when I was there. When I was there, they put a parking lot in the year I was there, so I could park I had a car. I parked my car in the parking lot there. So.
And I take it because there was no fields, you didn't play much sports in high school?
No, not much. There was McGovern Park was up pretty far, a couple miles away, and they had baseball up there, but it wasn't organized. It was, you could just go up there and play baseball with the other kids. That was all they had. They didn't have, later on, I guess, but they had, like Hampton School, where I went to grade school, they put trailers there for classrooms because there were so many kids that were, because later on, like Grandma's age and older, younger, like her age and a couple of years younger than that.
It's like
That there was so many kids that they didn't have no place to put them in school, so they had these trailers, and they would make that in the classrooms. They had 3 or 4 of them at Hampton School, plus the gym they were using for classes. So they had a lot of kids, But that's what they didn't have much choice,
And circling back to the Hampton School, and what kind of games did you play as a kid when you were in Hampton? I mean, we have these marbles here for you.
Oh, we played marbles. Those were my collection. I don't know where I just got them, but we used to play marbles with the circle and play marbles and stuff and play tag, and that was about it. There wasn't too much going on. There was nothing organized because there was just there was just too many kids starting to go there, I was older compared to a lot of the kids, so the younger ones were more, got more of attention because they really didn't have games and stuff. They didn't have volleyball or soccer or anything like that. But they did later on, after I was gone, they got stuff like that going, but not when I was there. So.
So, sorry.
You were talking about like driving your car to school in high school. Can you walk us through sort of how you got a car that early?
How I got a car?
Yeah.
I had a car when I was 14. I bought my first car, a 1947 Ford. I bought it from a used car lot on Lisbon Avenue. And I painted it with a brush, but it turned out nice because I sanded it down. And it was a nice car. I had that. I drove that to school. I was 14. Didn't have a driver's license yet, but once in a while I would sneak it out and drive it to school. And then I got my driver's license, and then I bought a 53 Mercury, Tudor hardtop. That was my next car. I had that one pretty long. Long for me is a couple months. Then I trained and got a different car. Then I graduated. When I graduated, I had a 61. I had a 1961 Chevy Impala. If you look in that folder, you'll see a picture of, there's a bunch of pictures, but look for just regular photographs. Look for is there one with a lady standing between the 2 cars with a trophy?
2 cars with a trophy.
No?
I don't see one, no. I miss?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Oh, I missed a lot. The trophy. Is it this one right here?
Nope. There's another one at the 57 Plymouth.
Let's see. Is it 2 cars? Oh, here we go.
2 cars. That in the middle?
Yeah.
That's Grandma.
That's Grandma. Look at that.
That was my 61 Chevy Impala that I bought. I bought a brand new. I was in high school, my senior year in high school. I went to school a half a day, and I worked at National Food Stores And I worked 40 hours a week. And then I had my money saved, and I bought myself a brand new car. That was 61. But then I didn't have that too long because I used to race it. But then I stopped at a stop sign on the way home from work one day, and a guy in a 54 Chevy, a Ford, he decided he was drinking pretty heavy, and he sort of drove up his car, up the back of my brand new car, drove it up and parked on top of my car, my convertible, and the radiator was leaking on the back of my neck. Oh. So my car got totaled.
Oh, man.
So then I went and I bought the black one with the trophies. Did you see that one?
Is this the one where when your car was destroyed? That one?
That was not destroyed. That's a picture of the show car. That's the one. There's two pictures.
This one?
Yeah, that's the one. I had that. That was a '62 Pontiac Grand Prix, the first one in Milwaukee.
Do you want to hold that up?
That was.
So it's a 62.
1962 Pontiac Grand Prix, and I had a little bit of a ding in the front, so I took and I had the front end taken off, and that's a Chrysler front end on there. I had it customized, no bumper, and I had it painted. You know, remember Batman's car, that black velvet?
Yeah.
That's what I had it painted. This car was painted black velvet. I took first place. All these trophies are all from when I took in shows. I put it in shows all the time.
And speaking about that, how did you get into racing?
I just
and showing up.
I hung around with some guys that raced, and it was a big thing in those days. Like a lot of car dealerships. Hall Chevrolet used to be on North Avenue. They had Mike Marinoff was the guy's name. He used to race Corvettes. He held the world record. I mean, he was the world champion. You know, he went all over to California, all over drag racing. He had a '61 or '62 Corvette, and but they sponsored him, and he never lost except once.
Who did you lose to?
To me.
To you?
Yep. By mistake, he made a mistake, and that was it. He made, and I never raced him again because I knew I couldn't beat him. So I would wait when he was out of town, then I would go there and race, and I could win all the time because I could beat all the rest of the guys. But him, I couldn't. But I beat him once, and he made a mistake, and I beat him. And after that, I would never go back because I knew I couldn't beat him. You know, so. But I got him once. I got a trophy at home for that one.
So how was the racing scene in total in Milwaukee? Was it really expansive?
What you didn't? We raced in south of Milwaukee, not Racine, Kenosha. I can't think of the town, the little town. There was a regular drag strip set up. It was a regular. It was a lot of people. They had thousands of people watched it. You know, there was bleachers and everything. I mean, it was a big thing. You know. Those days, that was a big thing. But yeah, I raced that. And Grandma had I had a 50 Olds I bought for her one time. I used to buy cars all the time. And Ernie Von Slavern used to be on Appleton. You don't know who Ernie Von Slavern is?
He was a car dealer.
He's still, I think he had a place out in Menominee Falls, I think, Ernie Von Slavern. He had new car dealers. But when he first started, he just had a used car lot on Capitol and Holton. And I used to go there when I was 16, and I would go in there, and he would sell me two cars. I had to buy two cars, $50 a piece, and one was my choice and one was his choice. And every time I used to have guys come with me, and then they'd drive them home, and the ones that he sold me were better than the one I picked. You know, he did that all the time to me. You know, but I would take them home and clean them up, and I'd put a for sale sign and set them in front of the house, and I'd sell them. You know, but then one I gave to Grandma, her first car was a '50 Oldsmobile, and then she raced at a drag strip, and she got the trophy. She won. I got the trophy at home. She was She raced about 3 or 4 different guys, but she beat them, But it was an old car, $50, and looked like a piece of junk. But when we got it all shined up and the seat covers off, the seats were brand new underneath there. The car looked like brand new, and she drove that for a long time. But that was what we spent almost every Sunday drag, in the summer for drag at the drag strip. And once in a while we'd go out to Slinger, but not too often. Most of the time down there. That was it.
That's really interesting. And you grew up with, cars are a big part of your life.
Oh, that was it. Everything I did was around cars for all. Even when I retired, a friend of mine had a bunch of old, Bob Bear. He had a bunch of old cars, and we used to rebuild the engines and rebuild them and fix them up, and then he'd drive them in parades. Model Ts, Model As. He had a Corvette, a couple Firebirds, Camaros, all kinds of cars. We'd put in our parades, and we'd get them all ready. We spent half a year getting them ready to go. But he just died a couple months ago. So, but we had that for a long time.
And circling back to when you were younger, growing up with your cars, do you remember the freeways being built around Milwaukee?
The what?
The freeways?
Oh yeah, the freeway. Well, they built that 60. I think they were building that, the one that goes down past the stadium and stuff. They built that in about 65, 66. Because I worked for Cutler Hammer. I was a millwright, and a couple of the big buildings. They were 5-story buildings, big buildings, covered a whole block. We had to move out and move up to a new plant they built, and some of them went to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and they tore down those buildings to put the expressway down there, and we moved it all around, and we moved the stuff, different plants and stuff. That was what I did. We worked 7 days a week. We were working to move them out. Then once we got it all done, got laid off.
Awesome.
So that was, that was about 67. I got laid off. That was pretty well done then. In 68, I went on a fire department. But 67, I worked at Linehan Welding Supply for a year. And then I went and went on the fire department. June 24th, 1968.
That's when you joined the fire department?
That's when I joined the fire department. I worked there 30 years.
Wow.
That was it, 30 years. There's pictures in there of that.
These are
I think in this here part, the paper, newspaper.
This one?
Look at the other one. Is there? Turn it over. The pictures. Let me see what that picture is. Oh, that's when I broke my back. That was the building that collapsed, and I was in the middle of it. I was in the middle of that building when it collapsed,
Wow.
and I got my back broken. I was off for 4 months with my broken back.
Oh.
That was 1971.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that.
That's fascinating stuff, and we'll get to that in a bit. But kind of circling back again to.
But when I was going to tell you, when I was younger, I was. What was that? Like I wrote it down. I thought of it. 1953, they built Miller Park.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? You don't remember that. Miller Park wasn't the Brewers; it was Miller Park. That was the Braves, and now they moved to Atlanta. After they left, they moved to Atlanta Braves. Then we got the Brewers. Where they came from somewhere.
Seattle.
Yeah, all right, they came from there. But I can remember the first games they had was in '53, and my dad and I and his friend Paul Till, the guy, Paul got some tickets for either the first or second game they had there, and we went there and sat and watched the game. We sat in the bleachers and watched the game, and we never, Then we used to go there pretty often. My dad and I would always, he liked baseball, so we always went together. We always go to the baseball games. I was 10, but that was when they had the That's when they first opened up the baseball, you know. Then they, I wrote some of the things down.
With baseball, with that, so you went to the Miller Park a lot when you were a kid, and you went. Do you remember? I mean, you said you remember when the Braves moved. Do you remember when?
I don't remember when they moved out, but they moved. They left, and then the Brewers came.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who the guy's name was. That he had a dealer, somebody had a dealership, a Buick dealership or something. He brought the Brewers up here.
Bud Selig?
Bud Selig. Yep, he had a car dealership. Bud Selig did. And he brought the Brewers up here. And I remember that. And then I remember when they, we were next to Milwaukee in '56. That was from Granville, when I lived in Granville. And in '56, they built Capitol Court. I don't know if you know where that is. It was, that was on 60th and Capitol Drive. They built Capitol Court. That was the first shopping center they built. And it was pretty big, you know. And then I think they tore that down now. I haven't seen it, but I think that's tore down. Then in '72, they built Northridge. Now this year, I just saw in the paper that they're tearing it down.
Mm.
So you know, I can remember when it was built. You know, and then they built Northridge Lakes, and then that was where the apartment buildings they had. They built that there. Then North Meadows was the one on the other side. They built that one there, and it was a lot of shopping up there. I mean, they did Kohl's, I think, built across the street. Gimbel Schuster's was up there. There was all kinds, Sears. You know, there was a lot of stores up there that time. But now it's all gone. I don't know what they are.
Mm.
I don't know where they are now, but they're not there. Menominee Falls, probably.
Mm.
But that was it.
And then going on the idea of like you saw Milwaukee being kind of restructured after the war. With Granville, what was it? I mean, what was it like to be in Granville and you went and worked in Milwaukee for a while? Like how was that? Was it much?
Well,
different?
when the Granville was annexed to Milwaukee, Hampton Avenue was the dividing mark. Everything south of Hampton was Milwaukee, and everything north was Granville. So once they were next to Milwaukee, everything changed. I mean, they started building houses. They put sewer and water in the street. We had a well. We didn't have water. They put sewer and water in the street. They paved the street, blacktop. They had all of a sudden there's a bus stop. At bus stops we had a bus. Other than that, we used to have to walk up to about 6 to 8 blocks to get to the nearest bus. And then you went down on Fond du Lac Avenue, and then you had to get on a trolley to go downtown. You know, but then they changed that all over. The bus went past us, went right downtown, but that was, you know, a lot later on, you know. But a lot of changes, you know. They still left the park across. They made a park after they took the trailer houses out. They made a park out of that. That was across the street. But originally, I can remember sitting on the front porch and looking across the street, and there was 2 cows and a horse in a fenced-in area, and that was a farmer. That's what he had. You know, he had a little farm. It was beef cattle, you know. But that was across the street, and I was little. I can still remember that. But that was it. Then all of a sudden, it all changed. You know, as soon as they annexed it, they started doing stuff. All the, you know, sidewalks, paved the street, you know, buses. You know, everything was changed. So, and they built a lot of new houses around there. So a lot of changes. Then I was 21, then I got married, and then we bought a house on Lusher, 6323 West Lusher. That was 64, and that was one of the houses that was built up from when they annexed it into Milwaukee, you know. But the whole neighborhood was built up then already, but all the houses were you know, 800 square feet. I mean, twice as big as this room. That was the whole house. And one little bathroom, and we had 3 bedrooms, but one bedroom was so small you had to have a single bed in it. That was Jeff's bedroom, my older son. And he couldn't have a closet. There was no closet because it was too small. And then that was it. The kitchen was small, living room, and one little tiny bathroom about, well, I don't know, about half the size of this table. Maybe that was about it. That was it. But nobody had showers. It was just a bathtub. There was no showers then. I don't know if anybody had a shower until we built our house. I built a house in '73 on 124th and Good Hope. That was the last street in Milwaukee. And that had a shower. But other than that, nobody had a shower before that. You had a bathtub, you know. Saturday night you took your bath, or whatever, you know. But that was it. There was no, you know. You didn't have that fancy stuff. You know, showers were, I don't know. It didn't even in high school. If you had gym, there was no showers or anything like that. You know. So that was, you know, that was just the way it was then.
Mm-hmm.
But.
And you had mentioned that. At least in the pre-interview, that your grandfather and then your uncle were both carpenters. So as carpenters, when they were building up Milwaukee, did they build any other houses around? When
in Milwaukee? No, they were up in Athelstan, up where I live now, by Woosaukie. They worked for Thunder Mountain Ranch. That was a big, owned by Wrigley Gum Company. Hugh Buck was the guy's name that owned Wrigley Gum Company, that Juicy Fruit Gum Company. He had a ranch, he had a big barn, and he had probably maybe 30, 40 horses, 50 horses, and about 3 or 4 lakes there. And a lot of people down in Illinois. In fact, he had his own railroad car. He'd come up in his railroad car. And he would, and my grandfather worked for him that built all the houses up there. They're pretty nice cottages. Cottages were huge, you know, big as your house you live in. They're that big, you know, on the lake there. And they used to fly in sometimes on an airplane on the lake, you know. And then my grandfather and my grandmother, in the wintertime, they'd stay there and take care of the place. Then I'd go up there and I'd go fishing in the lakes because it was all private. Nobody else could go in there. So I used to do that. But then my uncle, Pole Otto Kotz Jr., he was a carpenter, but then he moved out. He worked up there too. Then he moved down to Chicago, and in one of the suburbs down there. He was working as a carpenter down there. Then he retired, moved back up. But that was where almost everybody, all the relatives all live up there, you know, except Red Granite. My dad's relatives lived in Red Granite, and then my mother's, all her relatives lived in by Athelstan or Woosaukie. Mm-hmm. That was it. So that's where most of the time we spent the time up in Woosaukie. Then in '52 we started building that cottage. The house on Lost Lake there by your place, across the lake. That was my dad, my uncle, and my grandfather and I. I was only 9 or 10 years old. I was, you know, I helped them build that. You know, we built that. I did a lot of the grunt work. That was it, you know. But yeah, we built that, and that was '52 and '53. So that was how long we were up there.
So how, with kind of going forward a little bit, with your work as your early work with building cottages and kind of helping out around with your family, do you think that impacted you at all in joining the fire department?
No, not really. I don't know why. I didn't even know anybody on the fire department. I seen an ad that they were looking for firefighters, and I thought, well, that would be an interesting job. So then I prepared myself. I did a lot of studying, you know, and I did a lot of running, because the big thing was you had to run, I don't know, a couple miles on a track downtown. You had to run a track, and there was like 400 guys taking the test, you know, and they only took like the top 20.
Wow.
You know, and so I got on the fire department, and I went on Orchard Street. We went to a training school for about about 26 weeks or something. And then we went. I went to Engine 13 on 30th and Locust. That was right during the middle of the disturbance in Milwaukee. Some people call it the riots.
Yeah.
With Father Groppi and stuff. And I was lucky enough to go to the firehouse closest to his church. So I got to work there. Very busy then. And that's why I had that one picture. I was going to show you that picture of our fire engine. It had a tent on a closed-in cover, so when they were throwing rocks and bottles at us, we could crawl in there, so we wouldn't get hit. And there was a picture in there. I don't know where. It's in one of those books. Mm-hmm. But it was that was 68. Yeah.
And you described in the pre-interview you had met Father Groppi on several occasions. Do you care to talk
Well,
about that?
I met him by seeing him and being there. I didn't physically talk to him.
Okay.
He was at the same location I was. Mm-hmm. He was marching and we were coming from the other direction, you know. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really have too much to do with the guy because he always had a couple hundred guys with him, you know. They're marching, doing their marches around. So that was about it.
And you had mentioned also in the pre-interview that you had some stuff stolen from the firehouse during the disturbances in Milwaukee. Do you care to tell us more about that?
Hey, what?
You had certain things stolen from the firehouse.
We'd go out and to a false alarm or something, and we came back one day and the glass in the window was broke and it got in. And we had a living room, you know, with the firehouse. We had a TV set, and we bought the TV set ourselves. Our guys got together and bought it, and so our TV set was missing. They stole our TV set, and so we bought a new TV set. Then we bolted it to a table that was too big to take out the door, so they couldn't steal it no more. So but that's the only thing they stole was that. And then we, after that, sometimes we left somebody back, or the cops would, you know, police would come sometimes and be right there, you know, after we left. And so after a while, they didn't bother us anymore. But they did get our TV set, the first one. But that was about all they stole. They stole a couple cars that you know, people had around there, but not ours, you know, not mine. So that's about it.
And so let's see. So how did you feel about Father Groppi's whole equal housing and openness, like what he was marching for?
What was he marching for? Mm-hmm. I think he was marching for his own ego. You know, I think that's what he was marching for, because once it was over, he just disappeared. He was gone. You know, he didn't stick around and help the people, you know, doing things in church and stuff. It just seemed like he was there to cause trouble. You know, he didn't. It just didn't seem like he was there to help anybody. You know, but he was their big voice, their talking voice. You know, the one. He was the instigator. So, but I don't know what what else you could say. I don't know.
What was like, so I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, sorry.
Like, what was segregation in Milwaukee, at least? Also, like, around the area you were in as a firefighter in the station, how did it look there?
Segregation, you mean? Well, one of the firefighters I was working with was black. He had 20 years on when I came there. You know, John Graham, his name was. He was a nice guy. And I knew a couple of, I went out, made a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant. And my partner at Engine 18 and ladder 10, he was black. I mean, I had no problem. We had no problem with him. We had no problem at all with the guys that were black. We'd sit at the table, eat together, and everything else. I mean, we had, in fact, Donnie Jackson was he was a captain then, and then he became an assistant chief after a while. You know, a few years later. But I can remember going over to his house and talking to him and stuff. I mean, he was nice. We had no trouble. You know, there was no trouble. Right? You know, you could put your wallet on the table in the kitchen and come back the next workday, 3 days later, and it would still be sitting right there. Nobody bothered anything like that. You know, I mean, we didn't have problems like that. You know, later on, I suppose they did, you know. You know, it just I don't know. It just was just, you know, they got, once, I don't know, when all those guys were really nice, you know, I couldn't complain about it at all. Never thought about them being black or anything. And then we only had, as far as I know, we only had one Jewish guy. You know, all the years I worked, I don't remember seeing one, and Hispanics, maybe one or a couple of them, you know, very few. But, you know, there was more blacks than there was, but there wasn't that many at the time I started. But later on there was more, you know, as we recruited more in there. But I don't remember having problems like that when I started there in that house. And that was really a small firehouse. We had 2 engines, an engine and a truck in there. There was 10 guys working all the time in the small quarters, you know. We didn't have no problem. So.
And speaking of the fire department, could you tell us a little bit more about like what was the average call for a fire department in Milwaukee and how like that kind of life was working in the fire department?
Well, when I started, we probably had maybe a half a dozen. We had a lot of faults. They had boxes, alarm boxes. You pull a box, you know, and because a lot of people didn't have telephones, and and then we'd go there, and because you had to, you know, you had to go to the box, and it was a false alarm, so then you return the quarters. But you had to, you know, we did that, and we had a lot of fires and stuff. But as the years went on, when I was a lieutenant, and it got busier as we went on. We ended up, I think I started out like having maybe 1,500 runs a year. You know, all 3 shifts, everybody for it. But then I was a lieutenant, and we went up probably around 2,500 maybe, and then went up to became captain of ladder 9, and that was probably the busiest truck in the United States, I think it was. We had days we had 26 runs, 3 or 4 fires. I mean, we were going sometimes, we worked 24-hour shift, we'd be gone 24 hours. I used to go out of service just so the rest of the crew could eat, because you couldn't get back to eat, you know. But that wasn't every day, but I mean, we had a lot of that. But that was busy. That's because they had cut a couple of trucks out, you know, eliminated them. And when they eliminated the ladder 7, that was a busy one. Well, they moved us over to 30th Street, and that's when we picked up all their runs, and they were busy, and because they went out of service, and then we took all their runs. So we ended up getting between 3,000 and 4,000, 5,000 a year. You know, I mean, it really got busy. The days went fast. It was a busy place. But that was it. There's a picture of, I don't know where it is. There's a picture of that, in that one of those books. I don't know. There's a picture of I'm standing in front of ladder 9 with the rest of the crew. That was it, you know.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell us a bit more about the fire that the house collapsed on you and you broke?
That was a garage.
Garage collapsed on you?
Yep, it was February 16th, 1971. There's a picture there of the garage that collapsed. That's the one that collapsed. There was 5 of us in there when it collapsed, and I went through the roof. I was holding a ladder, and the ladder poked a hole through the roof, and my head went through the roof, and I remember seeing a guy crawling up the wall, the roof, and then I don't remember after that until we got to the hospital. I was knocked out, but he was crawling up there. I mean, but then there was a lieutenant. No, 2 lieutenants and a captain, and a firefighter. The firefighter got hit in the head. He got knocked out of a window when the roof came down, pushed him out the window. He was lucky. He got a concussion. The other lieutenant got a broken pelvis. He never came back to work. He was done. And then the other captain and the lieutenant, I worked with those guys. They got one got a broken hip and one got his broken leg. His knee got screwed up in the leg, but they came back to work. But I was off for 4 months in a body cast, so that was it.
And with your work in the fire department, you had, I believe it's called a fireman's key.
What?
A fireman's key. Do you care to talk about that? Your key ring you used to have.
A key, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a key, it was hollow, that was used for, your dad must have told you that. That the key I had, I could open almost any building in Milwaukee. There was a key, a box out on the outside, and it had a key to open that up. And the key inside of it was the front door key. And you could go into any building there was. And I had that key, but when I retired, I had to gave the key back. But I don't have it no more. I mean, that's what I had it for. But that was for any officer. The officers, all the officers had a key, to get into, if they had to get into a building.
Do you know if they still do that right now? Like,
I don't know. I think they still do that. I don't know. I haven't checked the buildings, but if you see a little red box about this big as cast iron, and it's screwed to the wall, and then you can open it up, and that's where the key is, But I don't know if they still use those or not. Now they got telephones. Maybe they can open them up with a telephone. I don't know. But we didn't. We had that little key. That was it.
All right, I think we're gonna take a break real quick. We'll be right back.
Okay.
And we're back. So, when we left off, we were talking about your experiences in the fire department. You had mentioned before something about the tunnels underneath Milwaukee, and could you elaborate more on that, please?
The tunnels downtown. I mean, the storm sewers.
Yeah.
And they on Wells and I can't remember the other street, but they were building the tunnel. It was about a 6-foot concrete. They mined it underneath the ground, and when they got next to that North Insurance Company or something, North something Insurance, they went and they cracked the ground or the rock down there, and it started draining the water out of the basement. And we went over there, and in the basement, I was surprised when I got there that the basement was dry, but then there was another door you went down to another lower level, and that was supposed to be full of water right to the top. And there was big pillars, Tamarack poles, and they had driven those into the ground down to the bedrock. So downtown Milwaukee was built on a swamp. So they had to get stable. And that building was probably 5 or 6 stories high. So they put these big Tamarack poles down there, and they filled it with water so they wouldn't rot. So they had to keep it full. So the water level was dropping because they had cracked the bedrock, and it was leaking into the sewer and going into the lake. So what they did was, until they got it fixed, we put a hose in there, and the water ran from a fire hydrant, just ran all the time, just to get the water level up enough so it wouldn't rot. They didn't know how long it was going to take. So I just was amazed by seeing that. I'd never seen that before, that they had filled the basement, the second lower level, full of water to keep the Tamaracks from rotting. And that whole building and a lot of buildings down there, I guess, were built the same way. But that was something, an experience I went through that I never realized that would put a surprise when I got there what it was like.
All right, I think. So, is there any other things you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I think you touched it all.
All right. So then we have quite a few artifacts here. We'll start. I'm just gonna start handing them to you, and if you want to say a little bit about it, we'll get that. So I mean, the first thing we can look at is this thing of marbles, if you want to just.
My marbles,
Yeah.
I won't open them up because they'll be all over the floor. But there was, I got these, I used to collect marbles, and we used to play marbles. They have a circle and put a marble in the center, and you used to knock it out. Then you got the marble. And that's where I got a lot of my marbles when I played that. And there's all different kinds inside there. There's probably some steel ones in there too. But if you open it up, they'll be all over the floor. So
We'll
I think your dad got that. I gave that to your dad, I think. And that was my, this was I got from, I think I got that from my grandfather. I think I got it way back. Boy, I think I was just maybe 5 or 6 years old when I got this. It was sitting on my dresser, I think, all that time. And the truck there, I got that. I think I got that from my grandmother, got that from where she worked. They were throwing it out, and she brought it home, and I used to play with it. And I guess I didn't take care of it too good.
Then we have a couple of photos here, and this is.
Oh, that's my dad. That was about 1945. That was my dad, myself, and my brother on a deer he shot up north. He shot that, and we were riding it. That was our house on Hampton Avenue.
We have a couple of pictures here from later on.
Oh. Now that's my car. I used to race that 61 Chevy, and that's my first wife in the middle. I should say my first wife and only.
We have these the house on Hampton.
That's me on them. That's me shoveling snow and up on Hampton. About when I was about probably 5 or 6, maybe 7. It's probably about 1949.
Talking about snow, how bad were the snowstorms back then?
Well, the snowstorm wasn't so bad. There was a picture. I was probably 3 or 4 years old. You'd have to look it up and see, but I had a picture of me standing and touching the top of a telephone pole in the front yard. Now the snow wasn't that deep. The snow it blew, and it blew up. I mean, it covered our house. You couldn't go out the first floor. You had to go out the second floor window to get down to my dad and my uncle went down, on the outside of the house, and they got the shovel. They had a shovel by the door, and they shoveled a spot so they could get the door open. If there was a fire or something, you'd never get out. So they shoveled it enough, but they had to throw the snow like 5 or 6 feet up in the air because it had blown up against the house, and they went down and they finally got into the house. But I mean, the snow, and most of it probably snowed a couple feet, but it was so light that it drifted, and the drift was against the house and was way up and out. There's a picture of me standing on top of the snow pile. It's not there. I couldn't find it. I was looking for that picture, and it was me standing on top touching the top of the telephone pole in the front by the road. But that was it.
That seems crazy. And yeah, and we have a couple more pictures here. So this is I think these two are the two.
Oh, that was at a show down in the arena. That was a show in the arena that I took first place with a trophy for my show car. I had that 62 Pontiac Grand Prix with there was a Chrysler front end. It was painted black velvet, Batman color, the same paint they use in the Batman.
We have these two pictures right here. Oops, sorry.
Oh, this picture was taken at 6323 West Lusher. That was at our house. That was one of the cars I owned at the time. And this is 1960. That was I had that as that convertible. That was my wife and her little brother, that was 2. He just retired. He's got to be 64, 65 now. But he always went with us. He was with us all the time.
Is that the same car that you drove to your driver's test?
No, I drove my 47 Ford to the driver's test. Yeah, that's not it. I don't have a picture of that here. I had a picture, I don't know where it is. I had a picture of my Corvette too, and I can't find that. That's the same car.
That's the same car.
That's the same one. That's a 57 Plymouth I had.
So on average, how long did it take you to like work on these cars? Because I know you said you worked.
I worked on them all my life. I always had a car. I was always working on a car. I always bought. Like I say, I used to go to Ernie Von Slaver. I used to buy 2 cars from him. Then there was Les Flaherty was on Fond du Lac, and he always had the hot cars, the speedy, the fast ones and stuff, and custom cars. And I used to sell cars there a little bit. If I sent somebody over, he would give me $25 if they bought a car. That was a big deal, And I bought a lot of cars from. I used to go to the auctions and buy cars at the auction. And I would drive his cars back, then he'd buy, I bought a car at the auction and through him, and then I got it at cost, and all that stuff. But I was really good friends with him, and he got killed in an airplane crash. He had an airplane. Him and his daughter were flying somewhere, nice clear day, and they crashed, and both of them got killed. Mm. That was way back in early 60s, early 50s, or it must have been early 60s. Les Flaherty. Then his brother opened a place in Port Washington, Flaherty Motors or something. That was his brother, but he had the place on Fond du Lac and Hampton. So that was it.
We have this picture of your
This
wife.
That's my wife at the age 15.
And where'd you take that picture?
I took the picture. I was in a class at high school class, and I had to enlarge a picture, take a picture and enlarge it, and that's what I did. So.
And then we have a lot of pictures from your time in the fire department. I think this is, I'm not sure which engine this is.
Engine 24. I was an MPO. I was the driver. Almost 6 years I was driving fire trucks. Engines, they had to pump water. I did that.
Then we have...
Did you also do maybe the repairs if they ever needed some on the engines? Did you ever do some repairs on it?
On the fire department engines? Oh no, they had a regular shop. You didn't dare touch an engine. You'd get in trouble. They had their shop, and they took care of everything like that. We were a union, so we didn't do that. So.
And we have this picture right here.
Now here, this is the picture I was looking for. This is engine 13. That's a 49 Persh. Now see that box on there? See that tent on the back there, that box? That's where we used to jump into when we were getting stoned. Or bottled. That was you could get in from the we used to stand. 3 of us used to stand on the back. All right, and then that's if they started throwing rocks at you or bottles or something, then you could crawl in there and they couldn't get you because it was like chicken wire, and then it was covered with the canvas. But that was it. It was open like that. We had that till about 3 or 4 years. We had that was the engine.
We have a lot of newspaper clippings and photos from when the garage fell on you, and this is...
Oh, that's not a good picture. That's a picture of me on the stretcher.
We have This is the picture of, I think it's the garage.
Yep. That's the garage that collapsed I was in when I got hurt.
And then we have.
Those are just the articles.
And just the articles. Yeah, I believe it's all the materials. Oh, and then did you want to show, this is that picture?
This is the picture when I was at Ladder 9. I was a captain of Ladder 9.
Oh, was it 1988?
Yep, 88.
Oh.
I was there 88, 89.
All right, is there any last minute things you want to talk about at all?
No, I think we touched everything just about. I don't know.
All right.
Anything else you want to know? That's about all I can tell you.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here, and
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay, now I can go see my dog.
Yeah.